You're welcome to the Policy Council. My name is Okwemi Agbaje. Today we look at the housing sector, the real estate sector. We are told that the country has a huge housing deficit. But the players in the sector always attribute this to some challenges and to constraints around the sector. I talked to an expert, a leading player in Nigeria's real estate development sector. And together we explain what the challenges are and what the solutions might be. Enjoy the program. Welcome back. It's still the Policy Council, and my guest is an expert in the real estate sector. He's a lawyer. He's worked in the Nigeria's oldest conglomerate, the UAC Group, for over almost 20 years. I think 20 years this year. And is the managing director, CEO of UPDC PLC, that's the UAC Property Development Company PLC, Hakkem Ogunniran. You're welcome to the Policy Council.
Thank you very much, Okoyemi.
Let's talk about UPDC briefly. I saw you launch this beautiful place, Cameron Green.
Absolutely.
Tell us about it. How long did it take that project to come about?
Okay, Cameron Green obviously is our latest project in Ikoyi. Took approximately 24 months from start to finish. It was conceived as a unique value offering in Ikoyi because we saw that quite a number of people are now building concrete jungles in Ikoyi. But we felt that there was still a large pool of people who still want to live in Ikoyi, but in a natural environment. So we designed Cameron Green with that perspective.
So that's why it's green.
It's green, not just because it's built with fundamental principles of sustainability, the design, the materials that we used, from MDF boards to aluminium instead of wood trusses and things like that. And we built up only 35% of the land, so we've reserved 65% for green. We could have done 40, 50 flats. We did only 32 units of houses in the place to give the people the environment feel, even though they're still in Ikoyi. But beyond that, UPDC, as you know, we're a listed real estate company. Our business is acquisition, development, management of properties, both commercial and residential. Hitherto, we've played almost exclusively in the premium and luxury segment, but in recent years, we've tried to expand our offering. Also,
I was going to ask you about that you're always in Ikoyi and all of that. So do people like me, we have a hope?
Of course, it's because of people like you that we are building, but in the past few years, also we've expanded our product offering to the classic segment, and currently we are working on a major inroad into what we call the comfort homes, which will appeal to a much lower segment of the society.
Okay.
We've also made significant inroad into retail and commercial recently. We're building our first shopping mall at Festac, and we have Festival Mall at Festac, and we do have plans to play much more significantly in that sector.
Let's talk about the mall sector. I see a lot of growth, not just from yourself. All the malls coming up across the country. What's driving that interest in malls, in your view?
Okay, clearly this market is grossly underserved. The channels are becoming much more formal. Middle class is growing, and when you have an economy that is tending towards that, you need to create outlets for them, not just to shop, but also to have some experiences around shopping.
Entertainment.
And that's what has happened over the years. I always say that if Johannesburg, with 4 million people, has 66 shopping malls, I think clearly Lagos will take something in the region of 25, 30 malls, because essentially you need between 200 to 250,000 people of a particular earning capacity to make a mall viable. And if you take a look at Lagos, you can see that it's grossly.
We still have just about 4 or 5.
I think in Nigeria now there are 8 malls operating. Actually, it will interest that all our malls are listed in Wikipedia. So if you look at Wikipedia, it's listed 25 malls, including the ones that are under construction. 5 other malls are under construction in Lagos. And I think there will still be many more because clearly it's a market that's been grossly underserved.
Okay. So apart from Cameron Green and Festival Mall, what else is UPDC doing around this point in time?
Okay, 3 years ago, we took a look at the whole country, and we decided to recategorize the cities in Nigeria. So we categorized Nigerian cities into A, B, C. A being Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. Okay. We also identified some B cities that we believe have the depth to also partake of proper real estate development. So you'll notice that currently we're doing Ibadan, and we've been quite surprised of the depth of the Ibadan market. The Ibadan market has proved us right. We're doing Asaba now. We're doing Pineville in Asaba. We're doing Calabar. And we also have plans to do in some other cities. But of course, we're still very strong in Lagos.
Of course, that's the
we're strong in Abuja. I mean, you have to play in Lagos. Lagos is 40% of the entire market, real estate market in Nigeria, has the greatest depth. So we're still doing our thing in Lagos. We're doing in Festac. We're not just doing the mall. We're doing the residences, and of course, we know we have the hotel, because what we're trying to do in Festac is to create a node. Which will be about the first in this part of the world. Is a node of entertainment, of shopping, and of retail, and of residences. So we have the hotel, Golden Tulip. We're refurbishing the residences. There are 212 apartments in the place, and then we have the shopping mall, which has 12,000 square meter GLA. So all that we believe will create the right node
and take development. So in a way, we are also playing an urban planning role. Somewhat.
I mean, clearly, as a leading real estate developer also, I mean, look at, take Aboyade Cole.
Okay.
We've done phase 1, we've done phase 2. Now we now have approval to do the third phase. The third phase is a commercial car park on 9 floors, which is in line with the new Ikoyi VI master plan just launched about 3 months ago. We have a shopping mall and we have offices, which is the third phase, and we still have a 4th phase. So by the time we finish that whole development, you can imagine what will happen, to the whole of that segment.
Okay, let's take a time out and we'll talk about this real estate sector itself. Absolutely. The challenges, why we have this huge housing deficit that we talk about. We'll be right back.
Who knows a bit better thing? Abi who no like better thing? All these fine things where they see so. Now money government they take do now. Abi, I say it's like, I mean, excuse me, I dey pay my tax. I dey do a thing, I dey pay my tax. Say you don't pay your own tax. If you pay your tax, I pay oh.
Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
You're welcome back. Still to the Policy Council and still with Mr. Hakkem Ogunniran, Managing Director of UPDC, a lawyer, accomplished real estate manager, and, well, I would say intrapreneur. So Hakkem, let's talk about this real estate sector. There are many issues we read about constraining the sector. We hear about there's a 17 million, some say 18 million housing deficit. The practitioners have their own stories around what the challenges are. What's your overview of the sector, and why have we not met the real estate demands, or indeed the housing demands of the Nigerian people?
The last estimated value is 6.4 trillion naira. That's somewhere around 8 to 9% of even the rebased GDP. So there is a lot of opportunities, but there are very, very significant challenges which are constraining the sector. And I'll just take a few of them. I think number one is availability of land, good titled land. The reality of the matter in this country today is that because of our complex tenurial system, it is very, very difficult to come about good titled land. There's uncertainty of title. I always say that if you take a look at and that speaks to your question directly, if you take a look at the value chain for housing delivery, there are 3 people that are critical if you want to grow that sector. The developer, who aggregates all the resources, the financier, who takes the finance risk, and the off-taker, because there's nothing you do if there are no off-takers. So you have to look at what are the factors that are clearly that will drive those people to make investment in the sector. When you have a segment that you have so much uncertainty of title, it becomes a problem. Because today, the reality is that you never can be sure. You may buy land as a developer, you have perfected your title as prescribed by law, and then somebody may wake up 10 years later with customary ownership, a competing title, you know, and that puts everything at risk. So that's a major problem. Today, the mantra in my office is that if you come to me and you give us a parcel of land, you offer a parcel of land, and there is no problem at all, we won't touch it. Because hardly will you find a parcel of land. You know, we'd rather we see the problem now and see whether we can deal and resolve it before we buy, you know, and then move on. So title is a very major issue. Added to that is very thorny legal problems. The Land Use Act, perfection of title, the process is laborious, the cost is too high. You know, I've suggested at some fora that in other parts of the world, you know, consent, when you pay consent fee, it should attach to the rest, the property itself. Because what happens now is that every other time there's a transaction, everybody has to pay consent fee. You know, you're looking at between 15 to 20% of the capital value of the asset. It means that by the time the same property changes hands five times, people have paid 100%, you know, to government. It doesn't work, you know, and that's why it is difficult for us to commoditize housing in Nigeria. We have to get to a level that people can buy houses the same way we buy other commodities. We have to commoditize housing. And, you know, for me, the only issue started when most governments began to impute revenue generation philosophy into the Land Use Act. Not a perfect legislation, you know, but it was not meant to be an instrument to generate revenue, you know, but the moment government started to do that, you know, the whole process became very unaffordable. There's the problem of infrastructure. You know, I always say that as a developer, every developer in Nigeria, you're practically a local government. You have to do your own roads, you have to build your own water treatment, you have to do your own sewage treatment, you have to do your own power, of course, you know, the issue with power. You know, so when you have that kind of situation, you will see that infrastructure costs could be as high as 15% of your construction costs, you know, and that's way out. Best practice is supposed to be between 2 and 30%. Wow. So all this go to add to the cost. And that is after you have paid all your charges. You paid all your charges. Then there's the issue of permitting and approval. You know, the processes are just unfriendly. They are business unfriendly. You know, and I always say, you know, let's give a lot of credit to Lagos. We've made some significant progress in Lagos in terms of permitting and approval, but I think we can still do a lot better. As a business person, you don't want to go through a 10 to 12 step process just because you want to get approval for building. And there's the issue of funding. And funding,
the interest rates. Funding
is at two ends: the construction finance itself and the retail financing
for the
off-takers. Now, if you take construction finance itself, now MPR is 13%. If you float a bond, it will be priced off the back of MPR. So you borrow at 16, 17%, even as a big company. You know, it's difficult for you to compete. You know, and of course there is the retail financing because the off-takers,
the man who wants to buy
now needs.
You will get 16. He will need 24,
25% by the time they add all the charges. You know, and added to the cost of perfection of title again. You know, so these are the fundamental issues which I believe that if we must move forward, we must address them. Yes.
Let's take a time out and then we'll come and look at policy.
Okay.
In that area and have your views around some of these initiatives that government and policy is trying to drive.
Okay.
We'll be right back. You're welcome back. We're talking about housing sector development. My guest, Hakkem Ogunniran, is CEO of UPDC PLC, Nigeria's leading real estate development company. So Hakkem, let's talk about policy. We've listened to government. There's the mortgage refinancing company. Government has tried to the central bank has tried to recapitalize primary mortgage institutions to have higher capacity. We've had talk about the national ID card, street numbering, dealing with some of the issues that people complain about. But what's your own assessment? Do all these things go to the root of all of these challenges militating against housing sector development?
Okay, thank you very much. Let's start with NMRC. The NMRC, we must understand, is a mortgage refinance company. The intention, the NMRC will not originate mortgages. The NMRC will refinance mortgages already created by the primary mortgage institutions and the bank. But clearly it's a very good initiative if properly implemented. I think one of the things that I believe we must give credit for in the process is that it's a private public sector initiative. The private sector was heavily involved in the process. You can see all the input. So I believe that in terms of refinancing mortgages and creating further liquidity in that sector, then the NMRC will probably do very well. You see, but we must backstep a bit, because I always say that before you can refinance mortgages, you have to originate the mortgages. Before you originate the mortgages, you have to create the assets. So it goes back to all this issue. And,
so a developer must have developed
you must develop.
Somebody must have financed development.
Finance development.
Somebody must have borrowed to buy the development
before you can refinance. So we must understand that chain very well. And Denmark is supposed to be one component of the Nigerian housing finance program. That finance program had 3 elements. One was dealing with the issue affecting the sector, the issue of title, registration, and things like that. One was to deal with the issue of methodology of construction, because again, we still build very traditionally, but it's a bit difficult for you to make very, very huge investment because of all the issues besetting the sector. So we have to also focus on those initiatives that will help to create the assets that the PMIs and the banks will finance, and that will go into the NMRC. I know the federal government yesterday launched a new housing initiative. I also understand that when the Federal Ministry of Lands and Urban Development, when they launched the mortgage scheme, that within 30 days, 66,000 people apply for just 10,000. But that's just a drop in the ocean. So we have to.
The ocean is 17 million.
17 million. So we have to focus on this. We also have to focus on creating the framework for social housing, for mass housing. South Africa is one example I always give in this respect. Between 1995 and 2005, South Africa created 2.5 million low-cost housing. So to say. Yeah. They are only second to China because they had a clear framework, a clear policy trust. But if you look at everything that we are doing, we're still like just scratching, and there are bits of disparate things that we're doing. We need to sit down, have a clear framework for delivering houses to people at the various segments of the economy. Then we'll be on the path to solving some of this problem.
Yes. So is in summary, your view regarding the current state of policy is not yet to who?
It's not yet to who at all.
Okay, we'll take a time out and then we'll look at UPDC's plans in this sector going forward, and Hakkem Ogunniran's specific other recommendations for development of the sector. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. It's my final segment with a housing guru, or indeed a real estate development guru, Mr. Hakkem Ogunniran, CEO, UPDC PLC. So Hakkem, we've looked at policy, we've looked at the sector's challenges, but I know that UPDC will continue to do whatever it can in that sector. How do you see your company and perhaps other major developers, how do you see your activities evolving over time? What are your plans for the future?
Okay, thank you very much. We have a covenant with our shareholders and other stakeholders. So in spite of all the challenges, and this is the only thing that we do as a company is just real estate. Now, in terms of navigating the sector, we're working and moving with the dynamics. I just mentioned to you that over the past few years, we've tried to expand our portfolio of offering. We're also responding to the dynamics of the market in terms of creating more retail outlets. So we have, like I said, we're building our first shopping mall. We have a few other shopping malls in the pipeline, which we're going to launch very soon all over the country. We're also looking at creating the right office, grade A office accommodation, for which there is very strong demand. We're working with government to shape the policy. We're very close to both the federal and serious state governments, and at every point in time, we always make our input into what we believe should be done to drive the sector forward. What you also notice is that as a key developer in this segment, we have also taken some initiatives to solve some of the problems, even within the regulatory milieu, which is not very favorable. For example, we floated a bond in 2010 because part of the problem of this segment is non-availability of long-term funds. Long-term funds are hardly available, and the gestation period of your project is between 36 to 48 months. You can't go and take CPs of 3 months or 6 months to finance that. So we floated a 5-year bond in 2010, which we've practically finished repaying. We finished repayment by March 2015 by God's grace. We also had to float a REIT. We sponsored a REIT because
as a real estate investment
trust. Because part of what I think we should do is to create the right framework to be able to create assets, and other asset classes, REITs, bonds, and other asset-backed securities that you could use to raise funds on a long-term basis in the market. Now, in terms of specific recommendations, in floating our REITs, we met a lot of regulatory challenges, because today we still don't have a proper law on REITs. What we have tried to do is to apply the law and the regulation on collective investment schemes to real estate investment trusts. Okay, it can only take us thus far, but we need to create an appropriate legal framework for REITs that will create REITs as a flow-through, transparent vehicle that solves all the problems around taxation, capital gain. That is what they have done. If you look at Kenya, this year, Kenya was mentioned as the most improved real estate company on the GLL index. If you want to see how real estate is doing, you go to Jones Lang LaSalle index. Kenya was #1 improver in the world. What did they do? They solved the title problem, and they signed a proper legislation on REITs. We are still rated 86 out of 102 countries, and that's still a problem because it shows that we still have
the environment is still.
It's still cloudy. It's not transparent. It's opaque, to use the language of the report itself. So we need to be able to do that. Government, as a matter of urgency, must simplify approval processes. We must make it a lot more business friendly. It's not at every point in time that you want to generate. So you make a law, for example, that you should not. You make a law against tree felling, but every time somebody brings money, and say, I want to cut down this tree, you collect the money and say, allow him to. So what's the objective of the law?
It's to raise money,
to preserve the environment, So these are some of the issues. So we have to solve the issue of multiple regulatory agents. Sometimes you are caught in between. We had an experience that we are caught between two ministries, and somebody says you must pay this, another one says don't pay. We say, okay, let's pay. The other one says you must not pay. They didn't realize that 3 months that we lost was a lot of money to us. Eventually, we were able to resolve the matter. But I've lost 90 days. Now, for somebody who has borrowed to finance a project, 90 days is like an eternity to you. So we need to work with that with that business orientation in mind. From government. We're doing a lot of JVs. Which I think is another solution to the problem. Currently, we have like 5 JVs, even with governments. We're doing a JV with Oyo State Government. Olive Court in Agodi GRA is a JV. We're doing a JV with Cross River State Government, the Calabar Golf Estate. We believe that also helps us as a developer because it means that you have a partner who provides land, so you don't have to invest in land up front. And while we are doing,
who is responsible for some of those approvals that you need?
It's the government. So working with government also, because they are also interested in the project. They've worked with us very well. I've also mentioned recently at Real Estate Unite that we also need to see significant collaboration in the sector within players. If you go to Lekki Axis, for example, there are probably 120 estates under construction. So everybody is doing its own water treatment, is doing its own sewage treatment, is doing, So the development is uncoordinated, even though they say Lekki is the fastest growing area in the whole of Africa. But government needs to now put a framework in place to harness those developments and create a one-stop shop for all of us to tap into. So
and then the players themselves need to see what we can do to come together. So if you go to a street, for example, you find 5 estates. Everybody has its own swimming pool, its own water treatment, its own sewage treatment. So we need to work together to create efficiencies across the sector and then pass the savings onto the consumer. Well, hopefully with the efforts of UPDC and the reforms around policy, maybe we will begin to address this 17 million shortages.
Yes, absolutely.
Maybe in 500,000 instead of 66,000.
60,000.
We'll be right back. That was an illuminating discussion. Clearly, there are constraints around real estate development, which my guest has very clearly articulated. And so even though policy is changing positively in some regards, a lot still remains to be done. The challenge of bridging the deficit of 17 to 18 million houses for Nigerians is one that would need to be solved on an industrial scale. That does not seem to be happening yet. Policymakers at the federal and state levels and the private sector must come together to implement a clear and compelling agenda for the sector. Thank you very much for listening and watching. See you next time.